Hey, I'm ZSH Plays. Welcome to Bellemont Zoo. Today we're going to be building a walk-through lagoon for the American Flamingo. It's based on my favourite flamingo habitat, and we're going to be building it right here behind the Madagascar house. Let's go. Our Flamingo Lagoon is going to be based on the Flamingo Lagoon at Zoo Leipzig, and it will all be netted over, rather than just having them with their wings clipped in a little pool like we did in San Bernardino Zoo and Tecton Zoo. The real habitat is 1,500 square meters, which is what I'm measuring out here. We're going to have 50 American flamingos in here, and now we've finished sizing it up, let's start building. One of my favourite features of the real habitat is the supports that hold the mesh up. Rather than just having metal poles like you often see, they have giant fake trees that go all the way up to the mesh at the top, which in that habitat is suspended 10 meters above the ground. So we're going to build some fake trees that will serve as the supports for this habitat. I've wanted to build one of these in this zoo since day one because it's going to be completely different to all the other flamingo habitats we've built on this channel. In this one, the flamingos will be free flying. Well, they would be in real life. Obviously in Planet Zoo, they're only going to be doing a little bit of flying, but IRL, this would be a proper flamingo habitat where they can actually fly. There'll be scarlet ibis in here as well. More on those later. And when it's finished, it should be one of the prettiest things in the zoo. Originally I was going to build this for the greater flamingo, and it was going to go right next to the savannah, but for me the American flamingos suit this concept much better, so we're going to build it slightly away from Africa, just behind the Madagascar house. I'm just putting these log poles either side of this concrete support so that we get the look of the fake tree that we're wanting. We've got a few branches in there, and we'll build some more in a second, and later on we're going to put nests in here for the scarlet ibis. So it's probably not escaped your attention that we do not have scarlet ibis in Planet Zoo, but our old friend Drac has made amazing scarlet ibis props, and they are on the workshop, and by positioning them in branches right at the top of these trees, which is where I saw them nesting at Zoo Leipzig, we're not going to be able to tell from down there that they aren't real animals, and if they're sat on a nest they don't really need to move either, so I think the prop animals will work really well for that. But obviously the main focus of the habitat is going to be the 50 American flamingos that we have in here. Alright, we've got a nice little branch together here, and now we're going to start placing it up the length of the trunk here, make a few variations of it, and put some metal supports at the top. And then the final thing we're going to do with this is tilt it just like it is in the real habitat. That's starting to look good now. Let's get on to the mesh. Confession time, we are not going to be building the mesh. This is the mesh from a recreation of the condor aviary at San Diego Zoo by Captain Callum, who very kindly placed it onto the workshop. And when I was researching the mesh for this build, I spoke to Callum and asked him how long it took just to build the mesh for the habitat, and he said 4 days. 4 days just to do the mesh. Now, we do not have 4 days just to spend placing mesh. We've got an entire habitat to build and a deadline, so we're going to be taking the incredible mesh that Captain Callum built and then editing it to suit our needs to fit the habitat that we're going to be building here. It's already almost exactly the right size for this habitat, which is why I was looking at it, but we just need to take one section out of the middle and then start moving the mesh around to get a seamless join, and there we go. Beautiful modern aviary mesh that exactly fits the habitat. Big thanks to Captain Callum for providing that. Now we're going to do a little bit of landscaping and get the paths in, and then we can bring across those supports that we just built. So we're going to raise the terrain slightly so that we can get the path at an appropriate level above the water. And then we'll just draw a nice snaking path in here with an area in the middle where the guests can wander around and look at both sides of the lagoon. We're going to have water both sides of the path, and the right hand side is going to be where the majority of the flamingos are going to be. Now we use the flatten to terrace tool to get some shallow water in here. We don't want it to be too deep. Flamingos are waders rather than swimmers, so this is a good kind of depth for them. We'll raise a little bit in the middle to make an island for them, and later on we're going to do a little trick with the barriers to make sure they spend the vast majority of their time on this island, because that's what you always see in flamingo habitats like this. They're almost always on the central island, with a few of them dotted about in the water rather than just covering the entire habitat like they would do naturally in Planet Zoo. And there we go, that's starting to look nice already. Let's get those supports in. These should bring a unique look to the habitat with the branches and the texture and the fact that they're at an angle. So what we need to do is line them up with the top of the mesh here where the existing support pole is. And once we get it in the right place, then we can adjust the height and get it to exactly fit into this mesh. And we'll also drop in one of the African pieces that we used to create them to make the join between the pole and the mesh nice and smooth. And then we'll move on to making a little pathway to get the keepers onto that central island. Always tricky when you're building any kind of island habitat in Planet Zoo because the keepers can't walk through water. Got to make sure they can get on here. So I want a really small path which we can then disguise with some elephant grass for reeds. This is what they've actually got in Leipzig. There is a path onto the central island. They don't have to get their wellies out to get onto the part where the flamingos are. You only need a really thin path for the staff to walk on in this game. I think a metre will do it, maybe even a little bit less than a metre. So that's going to be sufficient what we've got there. And then we're going to go in and start doing some terrain painting. So we'll get this all filled in with sand. And then we'll get some soil underneath the water just to darken that a bit. Later on we'll recolour the water, get it a bit more realistic looking. And then it's onto the rock walls. Love building a new set of rock walls, and I want a new set for this habitat because the rock work in the real habitat at Zoo Leipzig is really distinctive, really dark grey, covered in moss and cracks and all sorts of foliage growing in it. So we're going to create a new set to use throughout this habitat. Speaking of rock walls, yesterday I uploaded 3 of the rock walls from the zoo onto the workshop. We've got the temperate rocks from the penguin habitat, the South American rocks from the Amazon to Andes, and the Savannah rocks from the Africa section. So you can grab those on the workshop now if you want them. This habitat, as always, will be on the workshop on Wednesday. So if you want these rocks, you can grab them from the blueprint as well. What we're going to do is create one line of rocks that we're really happy with, like this one here. Loads of different decals on it. We're going to put some mulch at the top so we can get some plants in it. And once we've got this one looking perfect, then we're going to create 3 variations of it and put them next to it. Once we've got 3 or 4 of these next to each other, all slightly different, then we can create a group and then use that group to build the walls for the entire habitat. Ignore the one on the right, that was a previous attempt, but I wasn't happy with the colour and those pieces aren't flexi colour, so we went with these ones in the end. And just by adding or removing the odd decal here and there, we'll end up encircling the entire habitat with these walls, and you won't see any sort of repeating patterns or anything like that. It should look really seamless. I'm building these so that the plants at the top will join up with that line in the mesh. You can see there one of the support cables for the mesh, so it's going to look like the mesh is affixed into the top of the rocks. And because these walls are so high and they encircle the entire habitat, when you're in here you're not going to be able to see out, and it'll really feel like you're in a little Flamingo Lagoon. You'll just have the odd building or large tree peeking out over the top of the rocks. If we put the water back in now, you can see that it lines up nicely with that line of moss at the bottom of the rocks. That looks really realistic. We're going to make one final change to the mesh. Because it's 2 circular sections joined together, I want to sort of straighten out the middle bit so it goes straight across to the next part of the circle and it doesn't come inwards and impinge on the view for the guests. We'll cover that up with one more bit of rock work and then we can start planting. So I want a tree here to sort of frame the view. This one's really nice, but it's not quite tall enough to get it to where I want it, so I'm just going to duplicate it and then place it upside down below itself to extend the trunk. And then we're going to do the finishing touches on the terrain work around the Flamingo Island, because that's going to be the main focal point of this habitat. We'll just get a bit more height on it so the flamingos are more visible, and then we're going to put an edge in all the way around it to make it more realistic, so that we've got like a concrete edge that all of this sand and dirt is piled on. Otherwise eventually all the sand will just end up eroding into the water, getting destroyed by the flamingos, and the island would disappear. We're going to use this new window ledge from the America's Animal Pack, because if you place it upside down, it gets wider as it goes downwards, which means it's a really useful piece for doing stuff like this, because it'll sit into that terrain better. So we'll get the window ledge into exactly the right position. We want it just below the level of the sand and a little bit more above the level of the water, and that looks good. And then we can start copying this around and getting it to fit that island. Just looking at the sand, you want the left and the right hand side of the ledge to have an equal amount of sand on them, so it's going to look nice and smooth as you copy it around. We'll end up with something that looks really, really good from the water side and then not quite as good from the land side. And we're going to use some of the faux tree roots as rocks to cover that part up so that both sides look nice and smooth. This one's a bit too thick, so if we get the thinnest one and start moving this so it lines up with the concrete there, cover up the sand. If we just colour it so it's the same colour as the sand, it's just going to look like little bits of rock work and concrete at the edge of the sand just to make sure that everything stays in place. Just need to copy these around the whole island, and there we go. Nice smooth looking island there. Let's start planting it up. We're going to sink some ponytail palms in, as always, just for a little bit of foliage there. We'll get one of the forage pools in. I don't want that on the island. That's sort of the dry land for the flamingos, so we want the forage pool next to it, and then they're going to spend the majority of their time on the island, and then at feeding time they'll move over to the forage pool. And then I thought it'd be cool to replicate something else from the real habitat at Leipzig, which is nests for the flamingos. So we're going to use the recolorable conservation plant pot, turn that upside down. Already looks pretty nesty if we get the colour right. And then we're going to use some of the piñatas to cover up the hole in the middle of it and break up the outlines a bit. I did not think I would have used the piñata pieces, but they do the job here. They're just the right size to cover that hole and stick out the sides a bit. If we zoom out, they look really natural. Then it's time to put in the nests for the ibis. We're going to use upside down creosote and Netaria bushes for this. And then we'll get Drax Scarlet Ibis props in and plop one of them into a nest here. We'll have a few of these around, with them being way above the height of the guests. You're not really going to see that these are prop birds. Time for a fence. So there's a simple but attractive bamboo fence in the real habitat, so I thought we'd replicate that here, just using these bamboo pieces. What I liked about it is that there are 2 crossbars on the fence. One of them is in front of the uprights from the guest perspective, and one of them is behind it, which just gives it an interesting look. So we'll just do that and then use some rope pieces to make it look like the crossbars are tied on to the uprights. I showed you how to do this in San Bernardino Zoo, but if you're wondering how I've got all the rope pieces listed in the menu there, that is a custom filter, which I've created just by going through and tagging all the rope pieces with a rope tag. Makes things much easier. And once we've got those in the right place, we've got one nice fence. Then we can just use that to come down both sides of the path to keep the guests out of the water. Alright, we're almost done with the inside of the habitat now. A little bit more planting to go. We want to get these verges between the path and the lake looking really nice, so we'll fill that all in with grass and then a few plants, some of the elephant grass, maybe some of the custom grass that we made for our South America section a few episodes ago. And then we can move on to the entrance. We're going to have a little hut that the guests walk through to get into the lagoon. It sets the scene, makes the entrance look nicer, and also it gives us room to put a double door system in. We're going to have those really heavy ropes that you have to push aside to get through at one end, and then the standard PVC doors at the other end, and that'll make sure that none of the birds in here can get out. As you can see, it's a mixture of bamboo and corrugated iron to give it quite a rustic look. We'll put one of the new flamingo signs on there, and then we'll get the name on here as well. As we do so often, we're going to use the Australian signs, sink those into the bamboo so you can only see the text, and then we'll get the name in here. And then we're going to use the reverse of the bark pieces to build an actual sign to make it look like the name of the habitat is painted onto it. We'll get these so that they cover up this text pretty much, and keep playing around with the bark pieces till we get a solid looking sign, and then we can bring the Australian signs forward so that the text can be seen again, and then we've got a simple but effective sign for the habitat. And once we're happy with the sign, we'll take the front of the building and recess it under the roof, same as we did last week. Instantly makes it look better, and then we'll work on the rope door. I tried all the different rope pieces, and the rough rope multiplied a few times so that it's longer is the most realistic looking rope. It's better than the standard Planet Zoo rope, so we'll use that. And then we'll use our little blueprint dude to get the scale of the door so that we can bring that down. We'll fill in the gap with some more wall pieces, and then we can do some detailing. We're going to use the smallest bamboo pieces for this and just make an arrangement that goes diagonally up the front of the building and down the sides, and then we can clone that to the other side. And then we just need to move the sign forward a bit so it fits, get a floor in, and then we can move this into position at the front of the habitat. You can see how close we are to the Madagascar house here. Space is always at a premium in little city zoos like this, so this entrance is going to help to separate it from the Madagascar house and just announce that this habitat is here. And with the entrance in place, it's time to turn this into a habitat. So we're going to do some sneaky building here. We're going to have one piece of the chain link fence there, which is where the keeper gate is going to go, and then we're going to switch to null barriers. We're going to start running this around the edge of the habitat, but when we get to the water, we're going to bring this in. Because we've got escapes turned off, it means that the flamingos won't walk past this barrier. We can ensure that the vast majority of the flamingos are on their little island where we want them to be, and then there'll be a few of them dotted around in the water, and it will get us the exact look that we're going for. And that's the habitat complete. But before we check it out, the last time we built for flamingos on this channel was episode 1 of San Bernardino Zoo, so I thought it'd be fun to recreate the cinematics from that episode with the flamingos being brought into the habitat, seeing as we've got a little city and a pretty well developed zoo for the keepers to run through. Here they are. Let's check out Flamingo Lagoon. We'll start with the view from the Madagascar house. This is the first build in this part of the zoo here. I like how that looks. The surroundings are kind of temporary, not completely finished yet. And then we'll take a walk inside and see what it's like. I'm really happy with how it looks as you walk in through the entrance. Feels really realistic, and it really brings to mind the real habitat which I went to at Leipzig. and I love the new American Flamingos. They're so much better than the greater Flamingos in terms of the model, or more specifically the textures. And the colours are amazing. They look so good against the dark rock walls and all the green foliage. And the mating animations are amazing. They look so majestic. And there we go, that's Flamingo Lagoon. I really hope you like that. You can see it just popping up here behind the Madagascar house. Keep your eye on the channel next week, because on Wednesday we're going to have an extra video of something I'm very excited to show you. Thank you for watching as always. Thank you so much to those of you who've joined the Explorers Club. Hit the join button on the channel if you want to see your name up here. And I'll see you again soon for some more Planet Zoo.